Aparna, thank you so much for being with us today. I am really excited about this session. Let me all introduce you to Aparna. She is the Chief Product Officer at Microsoft working on frontier products and productivity. She's leading efforts at Microsoft to transform the world of work with AI. No big deal. She has over 25 years of experience as a senior exec, founder, and product leader. She's successfully led companies and teams through massive platform shifts from the internet to mobile and now to AI at Microsoft, Google, Robinhood, Akamai, a few other companies like that you've heard of. She was the visionary founder of Google Lens, an AI product with billions of monthly searches. She's on the board of eBay and previously on the board of Capital One. And she was recently selected as one of Fortune's most powerful rising execs. She has a master's in management and engineering from MIT, a master's in CS from UT Austin, and a BScs from IIT Madras, like one of our earlier speakers. You can follow Aparna on LinkedIn or Twitter, and I highly recommend it. I have to tell you, she is a fount of some of the clearest and most forward-looking thinking about product development with AI, and more broadly, how the future will look once we've all got AI incorporated into our work. So I'm going to try to use this fireside to pull as many of those ideas out of her head into yours. You're welcome. Okay, Aparna.
First of all, such low expectations.
All right, your career has spanned the rise of the internet, of cloud, of mobile. You've seen a bunch of these major platform shifts. They say that history never repeats, but it rhymes. How is AI similar to those previous platform shifts and different?
So first of all, I'm dating myself, but yes, I have been through all these shifts, like some of you folks. And like every time you say this time is different, and I feel like actually, yes, this time is different. Mm-hmm. And the ways that are similar are kind of like almost explanatory, because you kind of say, oh yeah, like we're in the pre-browser phase of this era and so on. There's a technology shift, therefore there's a user interface shift. There's like every layer of the stack gets rethought and so on. So that part is similar, right? That's what you see at the model level, the infrastructure level, at the product level, a whole bunch of opportunities for many of you. How many of you are startup founders, builders?
I see a lot of hands.
Whoops. Okay.
It's dark, but there's a lot of hands.
Okay. And so there is obviously opportunity to relitigate and rethink everything. But I'll tell you the three things that I'm seeing are kind of like, it just feels different is, number one, what used to take decades in terms of tech shift is compressed into months. Mm-hmm. In fact, I'm pretty sure while we are talking, I don't know, like there's a new model dropped somewhere.
There's probably a new frontier model in the last 10 minutes, yes.
Exactly, it's just breathless, and I think it is, if you think about the cloud and the mobile shift, or even the internet, like when we did the content delivery in Akamai, that was like, decades in the making. Yeah. So that I think is very dizzying. I think the second thing that's also a little different this time, it does feel like the incumbents are not, they're savvier, right? The posture, everybody's posture, both the big guys and the small companies is kind of like lean forward. Mm-hmm. And like, in fact, I think it gets, it's almost to a fault, which is no one's getting like into trouble for investing in AI, yeah. Right? And
maybe they should, maybe some of them should.
And then the third thing I would say is this one's on my mind, and this is maybe a longer conversation, you and I should talk about it, which is, I think we've not seen like variable cost software. Like what used to be, I mean, of course, you worked in infrastructure. Infrastructure costs were always factored into building products. Mm-hmm. But now this infrastructure logic is the same as business model logic. When you think about like, oh, should your...
Elaborate on that, say more, yeah.
So should you, for example, like if you have an AI chat product that uses more tokens, mm-hmm. and that needs to have more intelligence, mm-hmm. that's very visible to the users, mm-hmm. right? You actually have subscriptions that say, oh yeah, no, you may need the $200 per month thing because you're using more intelligence and more compute. Yes. Like compute choices were invisible to like users, let alone to business planning, right? Yes. And that's different. And the fact that software is no longer like zero, cost.
Do you think that's like definitively the future though, or is that just like this awkward adolescence that we're in? Are we just lacking the right abstractions to communicate to the user? Okay, you need an MBA for this, you need an intern for that. We can kind of figure that out when we're dealing with humans. We know that one earns more money than the other,
But I think it definitely is a long adolescence period because I don't see any sudden abundance of compute in the near term.
This is true. Yeah. Any other implications of the incumbents being on top of this shift?
I think the good part here is that I think in terms of the platform and the investment that's going into AI, I don't think it would happen if you didn't have the lean forward posture from all the big tech folks, including, I guess, Oracle now, right? And I think it's actually a good thing for the net ecosystem to be in there.
Yeah, yeah. While we're talking about big tech companies and how they are not asleep at the wheel on AI, obviously one of like the first and leading movers, I mean, infamously, Microsoft was behind on AI and had to be shaken up with the Bill Gates memo, and like clearly they took that note because they are way ahead. They are way out in front on AI. So tell us a little bit about your role there. What are frontier products? What is frontier productivity?
Yeah, I'll give you a brief version of this. Look, I mean, we just talked about, you just heard Ron talk about frontier models for biology, and we all talk about frontier models. But one of the questions for me is like, what are the frontier products to be built on this? Meaning, like right now we are in this just add AI phase where we throw chatbots on like everything we can see.
Yes.
And we want to go towards, as it says, AI native products. So I think what we mean by frontier products is what are things that can be rethought. In my world, for example, productivity. You don't say, oh yeah, like what is something that can just save some time in summarizing an email or document, but rethink the whole process of productivity and what products can you build there. So that's what my focus is. And already we see that actually, for example, when reasoning models came out, it was very clear that it wasn't big unlock if you combine models that reason with massive enterprise data.
Yeah.
So the question we are asking is, hey, today if you are an employee, you get a badge and you get a PC if you just joined a company. What if you also got a team of virtual agents? Like what would those virtual agents that can reason and have enough compute and enough like resources for working for you, right? Day one, you're a manager of these agents. What does that look like?
Yeah. That's kind of, I like that. I'm having fun envisioning that future. I can't wait for this future because right now it really does feel like we're sort of stuck with the chat interface, and I've actually kind of like really disappointed in chat as interface to like as an old lady like who remembers when all we had was the command line and like finally we got GUIs and the world was much better, and it feels like we've literally gone backwards in time to the command line days. Like it's so opaque. It leaves all the burden on the end user to describe what they want. So I was tickled when you said in your blog that this is the DOS era, and we're on the same wavelength there, but where should we be going instead? Help us paint what it could be instead.
So first of all, in defense of the little guy chat, like I think chat is a fantastic communication interface. Like you and I like talked about this event and like logistics and all that. Chat is fantastic in terms of a communication interface. In fact, the existence proof is I don't know, like 5 billion people who use WhatsApp and like iMessage and so on, right? Chat is great to communicate and in an ongoing way with a human and like anything that has this natural language interface. My peeve and my kind of frustration with chat is that just imagine if all we had to do, if we were working with each other. Chat is a terrible productivity interface.
Yeah.
It's a good communication interface. It's a terrible productivity interface. So imagine if we were working together and I couldn't show you my screen and I couldn't kind of point out what we were talking about and I could draw things and we couldn't like use a common document. That would be extremely limiting. And honestly, that's the phase we are in. And like I, for one, want to do my bit to kind of like evolve the productivity interface for AI beyond chat. Now, the risk is when I talk about this, folks are like, oh, you mean like these infinite canvases, that immersive interfaces with the heads-up display? And I'm like, not quite. I mean, that may very well happen. There's law of physics that kind of like are in the way for that. But I just mean collaborating and co-working with AI certainly needs a canvas, certainly needs like almost maybe a task list kind of a metaphor, new constructs and new metaphors than just a text message.
What is the Microsoft project for my AI assistants that I'm managing?
Exactly. I actually think like task list or even like, editing a plan. If you had an intern would say, hey, you go off and kind of like work on something. You want to see the work, but you don't want it to be this like, chat history from that person.
But I think something also I really want is to just, we spend so much time talking about automation. And give the assistant work to do, it does it, fine, it comes back, fine. But like, there's so many things that I cannot do that it's not just automating something that I would waste my time on, but it's like giving me, like, one thing that's annoying about chat is like, I don't have perfect memory, I don't remember every message we've exchanged, I may have to go back and figure out, and maybe we change our minds after that and I look at the wrong thing. How can AI make me better than I am, not just more efficient?
Yeah, and I think this is again like a a function of the phase that we are in. The other day I was talking to someone, and I'm like, again, like, I was there at the first websites were really these scanned brochures. Like, I remember the Target website was actually like literally like it said, coupon savings, blah, blah, blah. It was a scanned
It was
brochure.
the catalog put online.
It's a catalog put online. And then I think fast forward to mobile is the same thing, desktop website squished to the phone form factor. And so it's not a surprise that we are just seeing this whole like just add AI, right? Like chat interface everywhere. I think there are two things that are kind of exciting. First, even within this natural language interface, natural language doesn't mean not designed, right? I think that's the thing you're talking about, which is, if you are starting to, and we are starting to see that, like if we build this agent called a researcher agent that just goes off and let's say you're a salesperson and you have a brief to write about a prospective customer and help closing the deal. It'll come back with a report. It'll go over all the emails, meetings, everything, and the world's information, say, here's the stuff that you should do. But when it does take a few minutes. So you do need to kind of show the work, right? And say, hey, here's what I'm doing. I'm searching these websites, and I'm looking at these emails, and I'm looking at these meeting recordings. And so kind of like proof of work or show the work. That's one new construct.
Earn my trust.
Earn my trust, show the work. Another construct is this whole follow-up. So today it's just a prompt response. Again, prompt response is great for like a question answering product. Like, Aravind was here earlier. Fantastic like approach to kind of say Q&A is a much needed AI rethink. But that's like, you're talking about going from answering to doing things.
Yes.
Right? So the NLX I think of as the new UX, meaning what are the new primitives that you need for a doing interface? There's certainly not just the question and answering interface.
Okay, that's a lot about the interface to AI, but what about the workflow itself? When you talk about like how we're all going to have superpowers someday with AI, like that has to transform the way I do work, not just the user interface itself. Like how is that going to play out? And I really want you to talk about this just-in-time concept.
Oh yes, that is my current Roman Empire, as the kids call it. So here's the thing, right? Again, because we're in this just add AI phase, the interface has been incremental.
It's shallow. It's shallow.
But I think even the functionality has been, somebody's offended, but the functionality is also pretty limited, right? It's like summarize this email, or like help me understand this document, or recap this meeting, or what have you.
Right.
But I think like a couple of things that I think of as examples of just a prompt as a prompt for you all to think about. What if one of the things with LLMs is that they can kind of read and write near infinite amounts of data that we cannot.
Yes.
And so in manufacturing, there was this concept, right? Just-in-time manufacturing in the 1980s, and Toyota did a whole bunch of work to say, hey, you don't want to kind of, you move from this is a nerd zone, right? I can get into, like you moved from like a stock to a flow, right? So the idea being, hi. Should we just continue?
Maybe we just keep going.
Okay, let's keep going.
Hopefully they can remove this in post. Sorry, guys.
So I think the idea being that in the productivity world, just like in the manufacturing world, we are still operating with stock, meaning, these are the documents that were written, these are the meetings that happened, or these are the, like project lists that happened.
Yes.
But with AI, one of the things I see as a big opportunity is going from stock to just like real-time information, so stock to flow. A good example is like today, if you want a decision, if you want the latest on a decision, you don't go back to the document. You say, the meeting happened just yesterday. You basically invoke AI to pull all the information from documents, meetings, emails, what have you, and then say, this is actually the plan of record that actually happened, not the one that was written 1 month ago, right? Or another example for me, in fact, like we're building prototypes in this area, today, again, like design docs are frozen, like if you're building a new project. And then what gets written in code is very different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So let AI actually look at the code that was written, the way the app actually works, and then generate the actual design doc.
The design doc is an extract from the code.
Extract from the code and say, this is actually the ground truth. Right? And that definitely changes how we work. So because you're no longer kind of saying, let's have these synchronous meetings every few weeks to decide what to do. It's like much more real time.
Yeah. I've also heard you say something very similar to this, which is the idea that, if in the last decade software was eating the world, in this decade the models are eating software. And if that's true, it almost implies that the people building the models are just going to take over everything that software does. So then what would be your advice for the entrepreneurs in the room? Are the hyperscalers just going to suck up all the oxygen? Where's their space to build if the models are the everything product?
I like the leading question here. I think, look, it was my anti-Andreessen moment. I was like, oh yeah, software eating the world is so tired. The wired statement is model eating the product or model eating software. And I think there's two insights there. One is that just an empirical thing, right? I don't know, like if you guys saw 2 years ago when, in fact, like within Microsoft, one of our teams was building an AI-first visual editor, right? And then at that point, the image models were, they generated, like if you said make a human picture, it would generate 6 fingers and like 3 hands. And it was just like, or bad spelling mistakes.
Yep.
So our team spent a bunch of time, and not just us, externally, other people in the industry too, bunch of time kind of like building products that just worked around the limitations.
Fix the limitations of the model.
Fix the limitations of the model. Fast forward a year, no spelling, like the latest 4.0 image generation, or even the Gemini
5 fingers.
5 fingers, unless you wanted it to. And like, hardly any spelling issues and so on. So that is what I mean by, like, if you over-engineer for today's quirks, and instead of going where the model puck is going, then you're going to have a bad time, right? So that's, I think, number one. Number two is, I think, to your point, Jocelyn, about like what is then the play for startups. I do think it is about figuring out where there is a depth of the problem. Because the horizontal, the hyperscalers and all of the folks by definition will go at the horizontal problems.
The big horizontal problems.
The big horizontal problems. But there are, for the first time, I think there are big vertical problems, right? Previously, it wasn't worth it because you'd kind of like, software could only attack like one sliver of the vertical workflow. There's a whole bunch of manual workflows around. But now you can take actually this, if you think about an L shape, and that you're seeing like in legal, in accounting, in insurance and so on.
In biology, Ron, right before us, drug discovery.
Huge value there.
Awesome, awesome. Okay, we've talked a lot about how products are going to change, like how products will look different when they're empowered with AI. But let's turn the telescope around at the product builders. I think AI is having like a pretty transformational impact right now with the way that we build products, how we're building, not just what we're building. Literally to the point that people are running around telling teenagers not to study computer science and that the software engineering role is dead.
This is my moment to shake my fist and say, no, don't do that.
All right, so consider this your invitation to wildly speculate. I fully accept that what we're doing today is going to look like punch cards in 20 years. I'm fine. I accept that. But nonetheless, what is it going to look like? Is building gone?
Okay, so I feel like, I mean, yeah, like in fact, just yesterday, someone was telling my 16-year-old who's nerdy and spiky and is into music and math and saying, oh, anyway, like you don't need to like learn any of this like computer sciencey stuff. And my own take, I actually think it's like saying, I don't know, like, don't invest in literacy. Like, don't bother reading. I actually think that it's the opposite is true, which is the basic, given that AI, more than even like regular software, like AI-based software will be everywhere in every part of our lives. Like, I don't think we can even like afford to not have literacy across the board. And of course, that means the curriculum and like what CS means and how much do you actually do in terms of like current abstraction of coding versus higher level, like is prompt the new interpretive language and like, is that the new assembly language? There are all sorts of questions there. But new software tools will be written around that, right? So I do think, first of all, like CS literacy, I'm a strong believer in that. And I think it's like a core mental model, right? So number one. I think number two, I think projecting into the future, I do see more than any other time this utter blurring of the swim lanes, right? I see, for example, like, in teams, product managers, like we used to call, oh, this is just a PM mock. Like, turns out, like, we have PM prototypes now, right? So I think the lanes are all blurring, and you have designers who can code and, like, engineers who can build prototypes and design stuff. So I think that's a very healthy blurring of the swim lanes that's happening. I do have to say, like, empirically, again, looking at what we are building within Microsoft and talking to some of the AI native companies and the frontier folks, the team size is dramatically smaller.
Yeah.
And the team composition is changing too. So you have the generalist product builders on one hand. It's almost like a barbell. But on the other hand, you have these model whisperers, right? You have a few of the folks who really understand the model behavior. And that is the new kick-ass team that I'm seeing building AI products.
Call that a prompt engineer, like a context engineer?
You know, it's more than that in the sense that I think these models are so stochastic and kind of like, again, the model behavior changes with each of these. When reasoning came on board, like definitely there was a new unlock. So you have applied science folks who understand enough of context engineering. So I think there's a blurring there too. Like I think engineering versus research. I can't.
For sure. No, for sure.
Kind of divide those very hard. There are no hard lines there.
Yeah.
But I think then there's this broader swath of like generalist product builders, because you still need, from going from demo to like production and scaling, you need like the generalist product builders.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. You talked about AI native, you mentioned looking around Microsoft and also other AI native companies. And we have, we've talked about how as individual users of products were transformed by AI, as builders of products were transformed. How do companies become AI native, or how do companies get transformed by AI?
This one is actually hard. It's like what's the line from Neuromancer? The future is here, but unevenly distributed.
I always thought that was Bill Gates. It could be William Gibson. That's possible.
We'll find out. Gibson.
Okay.
Like someone should do a spot check with multiple AI chatbots just to be sure.
Yes. All right.
But I think it is actually happening at the company. So as part of my job, I talk to a whole bunch of the customers, both CIOs, but kind of broader business functions in different companies, big and small. And I have to say, a couple things really stand out. Number one is, like we talked about before, the posture is very different, right?
Yeah.
There's no convincing like, oh, you must go to cloud. Cloud is an important thing. Now they're like, okay, how can we build it?
Yeah.
So that's kind of like what we mean by these frontier firms, right? They're actually leaning in. Not all of the firms in an industry, but enough of them.
Yeah.
The second thing that's happening,
I would say FOMO is the default posture, actually.
Exactly, it's true. And the motivational might be like multiple sources, but I think the fact that there's a lot of leaning in. The second one, I'm sure you're all seeing that too, is that there's a lot of build and buy, right? Versus the typical trade-off of, oh, like what's the cost of ownership and how do you kind of look at build versus buy? And part of it is like the build is seen as R&D and making sure it's a training and upskilling.
Yes.
Kind of like a bucket and cubby hole in the leaders, which I think is a very refreshing positive thing, because I think then you have like an ingrown set of leaders and even like engineers who can do that. And down the lane, if there's a right choice to like buy versus build, you still have like a group that can actually like scale these products. The third thing is, this one I don't know how I feel about it right now, but I'll say it. My observation is that there's a lot of the, ROI questions are very, very murky right now. Either I see two extremes. One is like, ROI be damned, we're like, this is a brave new world, we're just like jumping in. Or the other way, which I think is even more problematic, which is, hey, like looking at it through today's lens, right? Saving time. The analogy I was using with one of our customers is, look, you can't evaluate the potential value of internet by saying, oh yeah, it saved you time from going to the library.
Right.
That would be like a
Insane.
terrible undersell of it. So there is a little bit of that, like, you have to kind of like first invest and figure out. Now, I'm not saying like recklessly go and like figure out until you have some milestones, but this definition of benchmarks and milestones keeps coming up as one of the things there's a vacuum around clearly. Like, how do we actually define ROI in a future forward way versus either looking back in the rearview mirror or just like, driving in a, dirt road.
Any milestones you think, or like it's true, what you don't measure, you can't improve, you can't optimize. Is there anything you would tell a company to measure?
Yeah, I do think, look, so one area I'm definitely seeing us invest in, other companies invest in, and I know there's a latest like Twitter spat about like evals and so on, but I actually think the healthy first step in terms of milestones is if you're, let's say, trying to automate a workflow, like let's say you take the insurance claim
I'm an insurance company, I've got claims processing.
So
Classic.
There are very clear metrics that you can look at. and there are, I say prompt sets are the new PRDs.
Yes.
And it is actually one of those things where you start with, previously you'd say, oh, this is the deterministic software, here's the product behavior, here's what the customer requirements are. I would say start with the 100, 200 prompts that should just like be amazing when you're building an AI agent. And then the second complementary thing is you need to know what good is, right? What is the right good response? Now, one approach that the labs use and many of us use is, you use the LLMs as kind of a judge of what good is. But actually, here's where startups can do one better, which is you use the experts, right? Yep. Like pick the insurance claims processing case. You use the expert to say what would be the ideal response here. Yep. And it gets complicated if it's not just a prompt response. Imagine a multi-step task here. So that's an example of where that milestone, if you said, hey, you're 30 on 100 on this, claim bench, right? Claim processing bench. Just like, the labs are looking at SWE bench and coding and math and so on. Figure out like foo bench, right? For this particular use case. You may be at 20 and like at least relatively you will know how to hill climb on that. Yeah. Right?
Awesome. Okay. Closing question. If you're actually working hard to build good products with AI, which I think a lot of people in the audience are, it can get kind of tiring that there's a lot of crazy hype and overpromises from opportunists. And it's sort of like, how can I compete with hot air? Okay. At the same time, I think it's even more discouraging when you get all that hype and opportunism brings out like the pendulum reaction to like really jaded, cynical takes about AI, which is I think where a lot of the civilian world is right now. If you talk to someone not working in the tech industry, it's like, oh, why do I need AI? Oh, that's just that terrible stuff that's putting actors out of business, but not really delivering value. Can you cut through, I think these are obviously both overreactions. Can you cut through that? Like, what's your pragmatic outlook?
So, first of all, a disclaimer, I am an AI optimist. I'm a tech optimist, so I think that bias will be there.
I think you're with your tribe. Those are the only people here at AI Native Conference.
And I think, we're all self-selected into this. I think there are a couple of things that I'm seeing as like important for us builders to reinforce. First of all, any new tech shift, they will be grifters. And the thing is, it's hard to distinguish between the grifting and the optimism some days. Yes. So that's a battle I would say, don't bother. And I think with this optimism, I would look at three things, right? So number one, individually, and again, I think I'm self-selected into this crowd. I, for one, am here for the return of the nerd. I think that,
yes.
Right, I really genuinely think that every time there's a massive tech shift, it opens up ways of thinking about problems in a way that we nerds can do. And so I think that's a massive opportunity. I would lean into it. In fact, I would go as far as saying there is a return and revenge of the nerd executive, which I'm very, very excited about. I think like in the past, there was this thing about like, oh, you have to be well-rounded and you have to do all of these things well. And like, you have to kind of be this generalist, right? And for many of us who've kind of like grown up in tech, I think like we're very spiky. And turns out actually AI is the good enough generalist. So if you're spiky, I would say lean into the spikes, right? Whether the spike may be, oh, you're really into this particular problem. You're obsessed with a specific problem. It could be insurance claims processing, no judging, right?
There's definitely insurance nerds in the world.
Right, and like whatever problem you're obsessed with, if you're spiky about it, this is a great time to be building products, building companies. That's number one, right? I would just like lean into the spikes. The second is I would use AI a lot more as that like complementary generalist. This is again an individual advice and like something that I'm trying to do too, which is, hey, wherever possible, what are things that you can actually lean on AI to do? And the reason I say this is, you and I talked about this too, which is, the models are changing so much that a few months ago, I knew pre-reasoning models, I knew I couldn't rely on like AI to do X, Y, and Z, right? Like make a very clear synthesis about like some area that I was analyzing, some competitive area that I was analyzing. 6 months later, you can, right? So in a way, like update your priors, right? And it's a very hard thing for humans to update their priors. And I do feel like that's one advantage we all can have, which is consciously, willfully suspend your experience from 6 months ago, a year ago, and actually update your priors and say, now try to like put a high ambition goal on the AI. Because right now, some of the ways that AI is being used, to your point, the reason why people don't feel the feel the AGI, so to speak, is that we are often taking the metaphorical, I don't know, the flying car to the grocery store.
Yeah.
Right? We're asking AI to do like these chatbots or even our products to do.
To write limericks.
Right, to write limericks or like draft this email, summarize this document.
This is the fish cam era of AI.
Say more.
Remember when the browser first came out? You and I remember that. Maybe half the audience does not. But like, okay, at the first we did not know what the internet was for. And so people at tech companies like would take a camera connected to the internet and point it at their aquarium tank, and that was, fishcam.com, and you could log in and see somebody's fish swimming around. Like, this is not very useful. You can't say what it's good for. If this thing was upending GDP and putting people out of work, you'd be like, why would I do that just to look at pictures of people's fish? But like, the line from the fish cam to Twitch, like, the fish cam was not, a society-changing product. But user-generated content turned out to be pretty good, and so was and so was content streaming. So like those were two big businesses that you could sort of draw a line from the fish cam and see.
It's like the stem cell of
yeah, right.
all of this. Like multiple like billion-dollar organs came out of that.
So yeah, it's a lot of upheaval if all we're going to get is limericks, but I think we're going to get more than that.
And I think that part of it is like us updating the priors, but as we talked about earlier, it is about the interface itself. The form factor allows, if all you're doing is asking questions, then you're limited to what the form factor puts you in the mindset for. Yeah. But if you said, hey, this is actually a cognitive like co-processor for everything that I do, you can use it as a sketch artist for ideas that you have, you can use it as a sounding board and a teammate, then as new interfaces come on board, you can actually expect more of it. The last thing I'd say around kind of like the posture itself is, and again, like given the group of product builders, company builders, so far, because of all of this, we are seeing X% versus X times, right, in most of these cases.
Yes.
Right? And that, I think, is partly what products we're building right now.
It's just at AI.
It's just at AI. So by definition, you're kind of like limited by what today's manual interface, right? Interface and like the functionality. So I would really push ourselves to say, hey, what are areas where there is an X times, X factor versus a X%? And chances are you look at it and go, oh, there has to be some proprietary data. There's probably going to be like a join of 15 flows. You can't just like, look at like one part of the flow and then say, oh, that's slightly better with AI. You have to probably rethink the whole thing. One of my favorite lines to say is like, the best X sometimes is no X. What I mean by that is like, for the longest time, people would optimize payment flows, right? It's like, oh, how do you start? Like, there's a huge drop off in the funnel because, you have this step, and then people look. But when you look at like Uber, among many, many other things, like Uber versus cab, one of the benefits is that I didn't have to like, forage through my purse and figure out the credit card. I would just like get in and get out, right? Yep. So the best payment turned out to be no payment. Right. Right. And so that's where the X times versus X% will come, which is if you can take the entire workflow, if you can take and the workflow needn't be business, it can be consumer too. And you'd rethink the whole thing and say, where can you completely obviate that, right? Yeah. That's when you'll get the X times. And for that, honestly, I think, yes, incumbents are awake and alert. But again, by definition, startups will bring a much more fresh perspective. Yes. You don't have things to unlearn. Your customers don't have things to unlearn as well. Yeah. So I think that's a great opportunity.
Amazing, inspiring. Aparna, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.